Best of r/malicious compliance episode 122. Subscribe for Reddit videos daily. Costco has a pretty relaxed return policy, so 99% of the time customers bring things in to return or exchange. My friend says it's no questions asked, but if on the computer system he notices in someone's transaction history that they're abusing the system, he'll deny the return and offer a pretty clear explanation as to why. Honestly, most people don't raise a big stink. The evidence is pretty clear and they say, okay, I didn't know that's how it worked, and go on with their lives. But last week, a customer was getting upset that my friend wasn't going to do a return even though there was a long list of transactions that made it pretty obvious this guy was routinely buying things, using them a few times as needed then returning them. In this case, he had bought a bunch of food and was trying to return the packaging for full returns. He's not backing down. My friend has full authority to cancel a membership, and this comes with a refund most of the time, so he tells the guy, "Sir, it doesn't seem like you're happy with our products and services. I'm going to go ahead and cancel your membership and give you a full refund of the annual fee." The guy, immediately understanding that this means he won't be allowed back in a Costco, sits kind of stunned for a few seconds, then gets real panicky, like no, I'm good, please don't do that. My friend isn't backing down, so the guy asks to speak to a manager. Friend plays the whole I am the manager of this department, so the guy escalates. The assistant warehouse manager comes over and looks at the transaction history and immediately sides with my friend, saying virtually the same thing but in super sing-songy, "We're so sorry you haven't been happy with the products we sell," and backs my friend up while he finishes canceling the guy's membership. Thank you. Next. First time posting. Please, pardon my grammar and autocorrect. Very short, but it made me smile, and I recently had 9th graders attempt the same thing with similar results, only it went on to discuss the grammar of the lyrics. Background. I work in Tohoku, Japan as an English teacher. If you ever get a chance, please come. It's worth visiting. I love my job, and I'm very good at it. However, kids are kids, and sometimes you get a class that's very authority averse. This class was one of those and rather stressful. I'm not a cool teacher. I come to school in skirts and dresses. I'm plus sized. I'm 30. They know I have a 2-year-old, and I'm generally looked at as a mom teacher. This took place last year after the Queen movie came out, and We Will Rock You was extremely popular. These kids had been monsters all year. They caused me to cry more than once. I had used my angry mom voice more than once, and the Japanese teacher T1, was at a loss of what to do. The story. The T1 was trying to teach "Where do you want to go" as the grammar point, and one of the little darlings decided to start the "We Will Rock You" beat. The rest of the class followed. At first, the T1 tried to talk over it, but the kids just got louder by banging on desks. He looked at me helpless because he didn't know what it was from. I was tired. I was fed up. It was Friday. See, my parents raised me on Clacho, Styx, Billy Joel, Little River Band, and Queen. I knew this song. I waited for the appropriate beat. I ran through the first verse. I sung the refrain. Here's what they saw. Chubby mom that they're used to seeing with a 2-year-old on her hip. Small town, in a long skirt and green sweater with love and flowers embroidered on that, shorter than them, singing the most punk rock song they know at the top of her lungs. Snakes would have been envious of the jaw-dropping. The fallout. Not much happened. I turned the beat into a way for them to chant "Where do you want to go," and for that class at least, we got through without any more incident. Next week was back to wrestling with the class like normal, but apparently they told all their friends, and so I had to sing it for the 4th and 5th graders the next Thursday. They've graduated, and I'm not at the JHS they went to. It made me laugh, though, and made that day a bit easier. Thank you. Next. This is my first post here in this subreddit. Anyway, onto the story. This happened to me a few years ago. I was around 10 and my younger brother was 6. I had just come home from school and decided to download a Minecraft APK. I had the APK installed on both my phone and tablet. My younger brother loved this game, and when I told him I had the game he would play non-stop. My mother doesn't like Minecraft IDKY, so I told him to keep it secret. A couple of days later I was studying for a test on my tablet, then my brother wanted to play Minecraft. I told him no, was studying. He didn't like that answer, so he told my mom, and of course she told me to delete it. My younger brother had a smug look on his face. Here comes the malicious compliance. I deleted the app with a smile on my face because, as I said earlier, my younger brother loved that game. The next day he told me he wanted to play Minecraft, but I told him I don't have Minecraft anymore. He asked me why I deleted it, so I said in my most childish voice, "Mom, big sis has Minecraft, tell her to delete it." His face turned red and began to throw a tantrum. Thank you. Next. This happened in the 80s in a well-to-do Bay Area suburb, and several family members were the architects of this malicious compliance. My dad and his cousins owned a large parcel of land, 10 acres, that was full of junk, piles of dirt and rocks, and a few abandoned vehicles beyond rusted out. Being the kids of real estate developers and entrepreneurs, they decided they wanted to build 2 office buildings, but their land was zoned for light industrial, and they needed it to be rezoned to commercial. So they filed the necessary paperwork and make the surrounding community aware of their plans. This is where the community gets worried that a sudden influx of cars during the day at office buildings would lower their quality of life, and starts protesting and sending letters threatening legal action if they proceed with the rezoning process. So my dad and his closest cousin / best friend get this idea to use the mostly useless lot for something that the neighbors and the community would really hate in order to make an office park seem reasonable by comparison. After hours of ideas are thrown around, they decide to build a massive go-kart track, as it falls under a light industrial zoning law loophole, and then they decide to go for the grand slam and make it a 24-hour go-kart track. The surrounding neighborhoods and community, as well as the immediate neighbors, were so vocal about this new venture that they began pleading with my dad and family members to reapply for the rezoning, and that they would all support an office park of the god-awful 24 hours go-kart track. Not being that vindictive, they restarted the process a week later to convert the site to a commercial office park. Thank you. Next. This happened years ago at what would turn out to be my last year at a Catholic school. For reasons that will become obvious, I don't have anything against people of faith, but it was not my thing. Very early on, I was 12 years old and in 7th grade, I was becoming disenchanted with my Catholic upbringing. I had so many questions, and it might have saved my faith to have them answered reasonably. The adults didn't want to reason with a curious 12-year-old. They wanted to see a nice Catholic girl who didn't feel compelled make so much distasteful noise. Sex ed was still a part of any Catholic curriculum, and as it turned out, my religion teacher, Mrs. M, was also my sex ed teacher. When she opened up our first sex ed class with, "Now, I'm just as embarrassed to be here as you are," I didn't see it as an expression of empathy. I saw it as a grown woman, humiliated to be teaching basic biology. It made me sad. Junior high sex ed wasn't just biology, though. It was an effort to shape our view of the world. Mrs. M taught us sexual health as per Catholic doctrine, and also peppered in some of her own weird, personal viewpoints, shaped by her own history, I guess. We had this box at the front of the class where we could discreetly write down and drop off the questions we were too nervous to ask out loud. Someone asked what orgasms feel like for women. We knew men ejaculate, but what do women do? Mrs. M did not explain. Perhaps because she hadn't had one a day in her life. She said, the women's orgasm is not a necessary part of sex. It is not necessary for procreation, and sex is for the purposes of procreation. That sounded very dodgy to me. I brought her statement home to my mother, who had always been very open with me about these things. I asked her if women really weren't supposed to enjoy sex all that much. She was horrified. She told me lots of men like to make women feel good, and sex should feel good for everyone. Then she said something that would be lastingly valuable. Ask questions in that class. Teachers are supposed to answer your questions, and if they can't, maybe they shouldn't be teachers. The next class, Mrs. M taught us that homosexuality was a sin. This was too much for me. I had a gay uncle who had been a huge fixture in my life. I felt attractions to girls in my class, and I refused to believe God would think who you love is worthy of hellfire. She went on to say gay marriage was both impossible and wrong. I raised my hand and asked her plaintively, why is gay marriage wrong? Her answer was, because they cannot procreate, and procreation is the purpose of marriage. I sat silently. I didn't demonstrate agreement nor dissent. I went home and thought about that for a while. I needed to come back to sex ed class with an inquiry that was going to properly fuck Mrs. M's shit up. It didn't seem like an easy task, but I came up with something I thought was worth trying out. The next sex ed class rolled around. Mrs. M taught whatever stuffy, deplorable lesson she had in the plan. Then she opened up the class to questions. I raised my hand. She called on me, and I said, if a woman is infertile, but she really loves the man she's with and wants to share the sacrament of marriage with him, does the church approve the marriage? It was a no-brainer for her, of course. I followed up with, but she can't have children, and marriage is for procreation. Why can she get married, but two men or two women who can't procreate can't? Anyone who is seasoned in Christian apologetics can explain this one pretty easily. But I had hit Mrs. M somewhere deeply personal in front of 30 other children. Mrs. M was a married woman of around 50 or so, with no children of her own. Very unusual for a Catholic woman who doesn't believe in birth control. Mrs. M was infertile, and to her, I was questioning the sanctity of her marriage, and its validity in the eyes of the God she dedicated her life to. It was a sucker punch, and she couldn't collect herself to punch back. She instead flew into a rage. Her face became a deep shade of red as she said, "This is not a debate class," and sent me to the office. For context, I didn't know Mrs. M was infertile. It's something my mother told me post-office battle. An apology letter was determined to be insufficient by Mrs. M. My mom came to collect me, and a battle ensued. Mrs. M wanted blood by way of suspension, and my mother was having none of it. Curious kids don't get suspended for questioning what they're taught. The only thing that worked in my favor was my history of being a nerdy, non-disruptive child with good grades. A compromise was struck. I wouldn't get suspended, but I could not participate in sex ed class, nor religion class. My grades in those classes would be determined solely by the written portions. These written portions were completed at a desk positioned outside the classroom, which Mrs. M smugly carried out for me every class. I didn't mind working outside of the classroom, because to me, it was a good example of the ease in which an adult can collapse under a child's questioning. I decided that religion and sex ed would become my specialty classes. I would master the curriculum, I would get the best grades I could, and Mrs. M would have to watch it happen. I worked very hard, harder than I had in any other classes. I studied at length and did additional research online. I finished out the semester with about 95% in sex ed, and 98% in religion. The final exams for both classes were entirely multiple choice. I was permitted into the classroom to be supervised for the exams, and there was no room for her biases to creep into her grading. She passed me the Scantron sheet back from my religion exam. 100%. I thanked her with a saccharine smile. She fixed me with a grim expression before moving on to the next classmate. A few days later, it was the Scantron sheet for the sex ed exam. 100%. I said, "Thank you for all you've taught me." As I smiled up at her, she said something under her breath and moved on. Mrs. M hated me with a distinctly un-Christ-like passion, and she found other ways to express it in the following semester. It warms my heart a little to think of her having to grade all my schoolwork, one correct answer after the other. The relentlessly curious, heretic nerd girl was a pain in her side that wouldn't go away. Worst of all, she demonstrated that she understood what you were teaching. She just didn't believe in it. TL. Doctor, my Catholic sex ed teacher tried to punish me for questioning doctrine. A compromise punishment was struck, and I in turn resolved to ace all her classes. She hated me with a passion, had to grade all my assignments correctly, and watched me get honors. Thank you. Next. This is small. Please point out any mistakes as English is not my first language. So, I used to work in support at a small software company a couple of years ago. Very small. There were less than 10 people there, me and the owners included. The job was pretty easy. I'd take some calls and answer the customers on Skype. One day, a customer messaged me. Not a big deal, just something like, "Oh, I was talking to your supervisor and he said you could help me to do this." This customer was very nice. and since there was nothing else for me to do, I just asked the supervisor for the files needed. The thing is, he was doing something else and was stressed out with this customer. They called us a lot. So he told me do not do this today and mumbled about them along the lines of they have nothing to do. I asked again, are you sure? The thing is, he also didn't like me that much, and he angrily said do not do this. Not now. Fine. I spent the day on Facebook and Instagram, and did some homework from my university. The next day, he was angry. They are calling again. What have you done yesterday? I almost answered what you told me to do. Wait, but said nothing about this to not stress him out more and just asked for the files again. He sent them and I was able to do my work. Edit, grammar. Thank you. Next. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, my mom suddenly decided to teach my sister and I to hold our farts until we entered the bathroom. I have no clue why. Maybe she got tired of us letting one rip when the urge came upon us. This might have been a very useful skill to have because, as a child, I used to hold my farts the whole school day and let them go like a bat out of hell the minute I walked through the door at home. Unfortunately for her, I thought farts were the funniest thing on earth and that they could be used with close family as a tool for my own humorous needs. So she randomly tells us from this point forward we are to only fart in the bathroom. We lived in a single family home with only one bathroom, so I would hold my farts all day until I heard her not only enter the bathroom, but sit on the toilet and start using it. I would then open the door, stick only my ass into the room and let go of the farts I had been holding. I would then close the door and say, "Excuse me," and walk away to laugh. After a few days, the only fart in the bathroom rule was ditched.